actually talking about resumes this week on Coffee and Careers, so welcome. Let's get into the mindset of resumes. And so I want to ask a quick question for everyone that is watching. How long do you guys think employers look over your resume? So go ahead, put it in the comment section below. How long do you think that an employer looks over your resume? In 3 days?
I wish it was 3 days. It's not 3 days.
Nope, lower than that, 20 seconds, all right?
Lower.
Lower. 2 years, definitely lower. 10 to 15 seconds,
Close.
Lower. 1 minute, lower. 15
seconds. I would say that last one, the 10 seconds is pretty close. It's at 6 to 10 seconds.
Yep. 6 to 10 seconds is around the time that employer looks at your resume. So it's not a lot of time. I know some people are saying like 3 days and whatnot, but it really only is 6 to 10 seconds. So we're going to talk about how can you make your resume strong enough that it can stand out in that 6 to 10 seconds. So we're just going to, my first question actually for you, Lisa, is what can students do to their resume to immediately impress employers?
I think the number one thing you could be doing right now is tailor it. Tailor it for the job that you want. If you think about the situation we're in, you may have the opportunity to apply for your dream career job, or you may just need a job right now because maybe your position or that opportunity doesn't exist. So it's so important to tailor it. When we have pushback, or you don't have to write 3 resumes, my common question is, well, how long did you work on your education? How much money did you pay for school? It's worth it. So you may have one just to get a job right now. You may have one for your internship, or you may have one for your career goal. But bottom line, it's really important to tailor for that job that you are applying for.
Okay. What if students say, well, what if students are saying like, I don't have enough work experience? So what about that? What would you say to them for that?
I really highly recommend you do a couple things. One, start gaining experience. Even if you don't have a job, if you're looking at your experience and all you're seeing is, you're a student, that might be a red flag. Maybe you need to start volunteering. Maybe you need to start getting involved in leadership and other opportunities. So anything you can do to open up your bandwidth. But it's not just about the job. It's also about, are you an athlete? Were you in the military? Do you have volunteer experience? Have you traveled overseas on ISP or other opportunities? The employer is not just looking for a really smart student. They're looking for the whole person. And now more than ever, the competition, they're creating solid resumes. So that's what you have to think about when you're creating yours. What is your competition saying? What have they done? And so if you haven't worked, that's okay. Start looking for experience, whether it's a part-time job just to get experience on soft skills and customer service, or volunteer or shadow. But yeah, there is information other than just employment that you can put on your resume.
Okay, perfect. What are some categories students should have on their resume? So you're kind of talking about, okay, not just have education. So what are some other categories they could have on their resume then?
If you have your relevant experience, if you have any type of job experience, if you have volunteer experience, if you are involved in clubs, if you're a college athlete, any of that's really important. If you're bilingual, I want to know as an employer, you're twice as more hireable than I am. And so anything that's going to set you apart from your competition. And sometimes I think it's important to kind of keep a Word doc on your desktop. And when you gain a new skill, if you really excelled at Microsoft Excel, or learning GIS over the summer, write that down. And so by the time you're creating your resume, you actually have content to pull from. Sometimes you have to ask people too. It's like, who am I and what have I done? Because we tend to kind of humble ourselves. But your resume, I always tell people, your diploma, great job, you earned it. But your diploma doesn't get you, it gives you the permission to apply, but your resume gets you the interview. And so it's your first impression. And if you are lacking content, or if it's vague or mistakes, that's your first impression.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we also say in our office, and so some of you guys might have heard this, maybe some of you haven't, we always say, have your resume to one page. So can you talk about a little bit about that, but are there also any exceptions to have it longer than one page as well?
Yeah, and I think, again, it's knowing who you're applying to.
Right.
Government resumes, they're going to be 1 to 2 pages because it's a paragraph form. It's going through a scanner and they're looking at keywords. So you don't really have, you're not doing bullet points. If you're a freshman or a sophomore, or even a junior or senior, it'd be very unique to have a 2-page resume. We're not vomiting our entire life story. What we're doing a marketing piece and creating accomplishment statements. So sometimes there's that, you're tempted to create this 2-page resume where some of that can actually go onto LinkedIn and connect more. And so there are times and places for 2 pages, government, maybe someone with a lot more years of experience. But think about it, even if it's a great 2-page resume, go back to how long I'm going to look at it as an employer. If I'm only looking at it for 6 to 10 seconds, if there is incredible content on that back page, I'm most likely going to miss it.
Right.
So that's why we think there's ways of, work with the Career Center. We can definitely help you create a marketing piece and try to get that to 1 page.
Right, exactly. So going off of that a little bit, what are some things a student should leave off of their resume? So maybe what have you seen maybe that students are like, hey, actually we don't need that on your resume?
Plagiarism.
Yeah,
and the reason why I say that, sometimes you're looking at a job description and we've seen it all the time where someone will cut and paste that job description and put it under their employers, or recruiters know what they're doing. They wrote the job description. And so make sure it's authentic. So things that are not answering a question correctly. For instance, if I was in customer service and I helped customers, that's not telling me anything as an employer. What I'd love to know is taking what you did, which is a duty, and now turning it into an accomplished statement. So created a professional environment, or maybe trained 15 employees which resulted in outstanding customer service. So take it and give me more information. Don't leave the employer hanging. If this is the only opportunity I get to meet you, then don't leave me hanging on giving me information. So give me those results that you've done under your job. I think other things, again, if they're leaving dates off a resume, if they're, obviously we talk about the faux pas, which are misspellings and crumpled up. We've seen it all. You want to make sure this is your first impression. You wouldn't show up for your date with spaghetti sauce on your shirt and dirty hair. And if you do, go do that. And the same thing with your resume. You've worked so hard on your education. You've worked so hard on your experience. Why not have this be the strongest representation of you that the employer gets to see?
Okay, awesome. So we're going to take a few audience questions in a little bit. I'm going to ask one more question to Lisa, and then we'll switch real quick to audience questions. So if you guys have any questions, please, below about resumes, put it in the comment section below, or there's a little box with a question mark. You can go ahead and put that in there as well, and we'll look at those. So I'm going to ask Lisa one more question, but if there's a question, go ahead and put them in either place. Lisa, is it necessary to have a summary, objective, profile statement? And then if it is necessary, what's the difference between the 3 of them?
Yeah, sometimes we use them as fillers depending on how much experience. Sometimes it goes under that example of an hors d'oeuvre, that appetizer. If I'm going to a restaurant, I'm going to order an appetizer, one, because I'm picky. But if that comes back flat or boring or cold, I'm probably not going to order off the menu. So if that summary statement is vague, or it's just repetitive, or it's using just the canned words, hardworking, disciplined, detail-oriented, I've already read those so many times as an employer. So if you're doing a profile statement or a summary statement, all that's doing is kind of taking your experience and summarizing it in 2 sentences. Think of it as your elevator pitch. It's like, I'm going to grab your attention so quickly. I am a trilingual student with outstanding experience and outstanding cross-cultural experience. The minute I see that, it's like, okay, I want to know a little bit more about this person. Or what is it? Is it reflecting what you've done within your career or your education? An objective is more of, I know I'm applying for this job in particular, so I'm letting them know this is a position. That being said, if it's going to take away from your resume, if it's going to take away from content, as an employer, I want to see everything about you. I'm more interested in the dates. I'm more interested in those accomplished statements that you've been able to succeed in while you've worked somewhere.
Okay. So yeah, so you would say it's not fully necessary, but if you would want to have it, you can.
Yeah. And you, again, make sure it's quantifiable. If you're telling me that you're detail oriented in your summary and yet there's misspellings or dates, then you've just discounted yourself. Or if there's a lot of, there has to be evidence of that summary statement. There has to be evidence and proof of whatever you're telling me in your profile or that summary.
Okay. All right. So we're going to take some audience questions right now. So again, if you guys have any questions, and then we'll go back to some things that we've talked about. So Lisa, I'm sorry, you're going to get your face chopped off a little bit, but it says,
Wouldn't be the first time.
should a resume look any different for a master's level student versus an undergraduate?
Yeah, I think for an MBA or for a master's student, it really needs to reflect your leadership. So, this is where you don't necessarily have to have maybe some of those summer jobs that you use, but you can really concentrate on the projects that you've been able to work within your cohort. Any type of leadership, anything, again, that points directly to your ultimate goal. Again, to much is given, much is required. So if you have additional experience, it needs to be reflected throughout the entire resume.
Okay. All right. Another question. Let's see right here. How/should you use references in your resume?
So it used to be the good old days. We would put references available on request. We don't need to tell that because they know that. The only people represented on your resume should be you. So you don't add your boss to underneath your job description. So create a separate reference page. So it has nothing to do with your resume, but it's a separate piece of paper, same heading, same font with your references. So the emails and maybe how you knew them. So we always say, maybe a professional, a career from your career or your job, a professor, and maybe a friend or someone who knows you on a personal level. But don't put them on your resume. That's taking away really a lot of important room that you could be using for yourself.
Yeah, and just make sure real quick to ask them. Don't put your references on your resume if you haven't asked them. You need to make sure that you ask them. I would say like 3 to 5, and what Lisa was saying, like professional, any of those type of references will be great to have on your resume, but make sure that you ask them, because you don't want to have them call and the reference is like, maybe they're not picking up, or they have no idea that you were applying and that you were on, or they were on your reference page. So. Yeah.
Don't just put their address. Make sure that there is content, the email, and the phone number. Don't make the employer work to get to know you via your email, via your resume, or your references.
Okay. All right. So we have another one. Let's see. Let's see what this one says. How do you write a resume? I don't know if we're able to see all of this. I don't think we're able to see it. How do you write a resume? I was badly hurt with a former employer my second week. I was injured. Do I put that? I want to say, I don't know what the rest is saying. Do I put that employer down, I think?
Well, let me assume what, and again, this is great information when you reach out to us at the Career Center. You can email, all of our staff emails are on our website. If you were only working there for a short time, it may not be worth it to put on there. So if you were injured and you're no longer working, and you're only there a couple of weeks, there's nothing really quantifiable that you could put under your resume. There's probably not a whole lot of accomplishments. That's why there's a lot of questions with people saying, well, I was offered an internship and then COVID-19 happened. Now I don't have an internship. Do I put it on my resume? No, it's a bummer, but your resume speaks of what you have done and telling the employer a story. So if you were badly hurt, and you ended up having to go on workman's comp or laid off, and you're going back, you can still put that on there as long as you have quantifiable results or accomplishment statements to put under that job. But that's a great question to work with us in the Career Center. We can help format that accordingly.
Perfect. So we got two questions. I'm going to combine them kind of together, Lisa. They're, I have, how should a resume look like to apply to nursing school? And then does a resume look different in applying for graduate school? So I would say graduate school and nursing, like the nursing program, if you just want to talk on both.
Okay. Yeah, with nursing, again, think about it. Every resume, for the most part, it's going to be a white piece of paper, black font, your education, your experience, skills. What's going to set you apart? And this is where it's so important not to use a template or use copy and paste, because if I'm an employer and I'm looking at 3 resumes and seeing kind of the exact same bullet points, even though your intention is saying, well, this is what I've done, you still have to be authentic. And you don't ever want to come off that you've plagiarized something. So if it's a nursing resume, you should have your clinicals on it. You should have all your certifications and skills. If you have experience as a CNA, as an EMT, any of the other experience that you've had that has driven towards your education, that can be represented. Nursing resumes are really fun because you got a lot of content. And so we work with reducing the borders or minimizing some spaces in order to get on there. Also be in mind that resumes change all the time. Resumes 10 years ago looked a lot different than they do now. And I think that that's going to continue to change, especially as virtual interviews and phone interviews are happening. And so that's why it's so important to go through that resume over and over again, making sure it is the best representation. For going into grad school, what do you want that university? You're not just choosing the university's choosing you. So does it represent leadership? Does it represent volunteer? Is a holistic person being represented? So make sure that you have your leadership experience, your any of your the undergrad collegiate experience represented, as well as, especially for nursing, CNA, any type of volunteer, any experience of you shadowing a doctor, shadowing in a clinic is really important as well.
Perfect. So we are going to answer some more of your guys' questions in just a few minutes. We're going to go back to some of the questions that we prepared beforehand, but thank you guys so much for all your participation. We're getting tons of great questions, so thank you for that. And if you guys have more questions, go ahead, put them below. We might not get to every question, so you're more than welcome to reach out to us after if we didn't answer your question. So we'll come back to your guys' questions in a few minutes. Okay. So let's do a couple what ifs, Lisa. So what if a student got a job or an internship, but it was rescinded because of COVID-19? Can they or should they put that on their resume still?
No. Again, congratulations for getting it. And it's a tough situation that you're not able to. Here's the problem though. You don't have anything to put, you got the job, but you haven't done anything. So you haven't told the employer what you've done as a result or what you've gained. Now, that being said, there's some great things that you can do. I recently worked with a student, software engineering student, had his position rescinded. And so he asked, it's like, what should I do in the meantime? And I said, if you need to work, get a job anywhere. And then wait until the market changes a little bit and then start applying again. He did. He started working at DoorDash. He's a software engineering student. Does DoorDash have anything to do with it? Not necessarily, but here's the thing. As an employer, if I saw a resume and here all of his technical skills are on there, all of his his projects and previous internships, and then I see summer of 2020 DoorDash, I asked him what he learned through that. He learned how to multitask and how to be a liaison between a customer and a client. He learned how to run his own business. So even though that has nothing to do with the internship he originally received, boy, he's telling the employer that he's still solution-minded as an engineer, and he's still gaining incredible experience. And who knows? I mean, if you think about it, these companies, they hire engineers. I just heard a story today about a student who started working at Whole Foods, and they loved his work ethic, and they're moving him up. And so, it's important to, if you didn't get it, then open up that bandwidth like we've talked about before and apply elsewhere and continue to gain customer service skills, continue to work on soft skills.
Perfect. And then what if a student only worked, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but what if a student only worked at a job for a month? Should they still put that on there?
First of all, if it's a temporary job or a summer job, if you're working at a camp, or if it was literally for 1 month, then state that. So summer, temporary position, state it. But as an employer, if I see that continually down the resume, that's going to be a red flag. I'm investing in you. And if all of a sudden I'm going to put my money into the hiring process and the onboarding, and I'm only going to get you for a month, I'm probably going to look at the person who has a little bit more longevity. So if that was the nature of the position, state it. If not, come see us for career counseling.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, we're gonna do another what if question, and then we have quite a bit of questions that are coming in from the audience. So we'll get to those in a second. So if a student got offered a job, hasn't started yet. So for an example, if a student is an RA next year, how can they indicate that on their resume?
Mm-hmm. So it's right when you start. So let's say the job actually starts in August, but maybe you're training starting in June or July. That's when you can start, the minute you are getting paid, the minute you are clocking in or training. So, but again, remember that if you don't have anything to put on it, how are you going to back up? How are you going to give evidence of that in an interview? So what you can do, so let's say even for ISP or training to go overseas or some other leadership position, if you've received training, what you can do under bullet point is, collaborating with 16 other student leaders in order to gain experience in facilitating, relationships on campus, telling you what you've learned. But keep it simple. Don't overdo it, especially if you've only been training, for 2 months. So there, you can still get it on there. But if you don't have anything to qualify and give evidence of what you're doing, it's not doing you any good.
Okay. All right. So let's get into some audience questions. We had one that said, how have resumes from around 10 years ago changed from how they look now? Someone was saying they hadn't changed their resume for 5 years. So can you speak to that?
I love that. Again, it kind of goes back to that 2-page. I know years ago, without telling you my age, years ago, my resume was 2 pages. It was more listing my duties instead of my accomplishments. Again, our time as employers has changed so much. And so we don't really have the time to check all the duties. If I'm only looking at this for 6 seconds, again, 5 or 10 years ago as an employer, I probably had a little bit more time. Now, especially now with all the changes going on, our time is so limited. So we're looking at this, trying to gain information. And so that's why you have to look at this as a marketing piece rather than listing your duties. So writing accomplished statements, making sure there's quantifiable information on there, making sure your skills are on there, dates, anything that's going to set you apart from the competition. But I would say most of the changes are the length of it and accomplished statements.
Okay. All right. So here's another question that's going to go on the screen, Lisa. It says, what if you run out of room? Should I put all awards on it?
Great question. Work with the Career Center. So this is where we know how to manipulate space. It's like a challenge. It's like a game to us. So what we can do is definitely, work with minimizing spaces or manipulating those borders. But there's ways of putting your awards in 3 different columns or changing the format a little bit in order to get them on there. You remember, if it's a college and higher resume, we're not putting any high school information on there. Your high school accomplishments definitely helped establish you as a strong candidate, but we are looking at as who are you as a college student and as a young professional. So there may be ways of just minimizing some of your bullet points, changing the format, but that's what we love doing at the Career Center.
Yeah, I'm gonna have you lead and also kind of go into this one as well. It's basically everything you were just saying. Where should the shadowing healthcare experience certifications be put on a resume?
It changes. So you definitely want to, in my opinion, you want everything that is leading up to the job that you want to be as close to the top. So if you have phenomenal certifications or you're bilingual, I don't want to see that at the very end. It may be missed. So anything that's pointing to your degree or a job that you want, that should be, so it should be, your education, and then consider putting your skills or clinicals down, and then additional experience. But again, every resume is different. Sometimes we have to break it up to relevant experience and additional experience projects. So there's, you don't want to copycat. That's why we're not big on templates in the Career Center, but we want to make sure that it's still tailored to the job that you're applying for. Certifications for a CNA or a nursing student is really important if that's what you're applying for. But if you're a nursing student applying to be a hostess at a restaurant, put your certifications on the bottom and let me see your customer service at the top. So that it really depends on where you're applying.
Okay. We also got another question. I don't know if we'll be able to see all of it. I don't think we will. It says, I used to work at Staters and now I'm working there again during the pandemic. How do I put the time? Probably like, how did they indicate that?
Yeah. So if you broke it up, you worked there 2 years ago, you can work it with that again, we can help you with the resume because everyone's different. So if like Stater Brothers, Checker, you could separate the dates instead of taking so much room and putting Stater Brothers twice. You might want to put, September 2016 to 2019, and then right next to it put, March 2020 to present, and then you can still put the same duties. And so sometimes, it shows the longevity. It tells an employer right away, okay, this person's loyal, this person is dedicated, and he was able to earn a position back. So even just looking at those dates can tell an incredible story about the candidate.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then let's see. It says, how should a LinkedIn be different than a resume?
Great question. So your resume is your marketing piece. We used to be able to go in and introduce ourselves to an employer or, drop it off at a store so they have that connection. We don't get to do that anymore, more so now than ever. So your resume is a detailed one-page marketing piece of your accomplishments, whereas a LinkedIn aligns to your resume. It should still model it, but it takes it to the next step. Think of it as connecting more. So if you and I had an opportunity to sit down for a cup of coffee, Rebecca, and I said, tell me a little bit about yourself. You can't really say that in a resume, but in that about section on LinkedIn, you're able to say, this is why I chose to get into this career. I feel so fortunate as a college graduate to have this experience, and this is what I want to do with it. You can't say that on a resume, but a LinkedIn connects, and it's your resume on steroids, but it's actually a narrative, whereas you don't want to use personal pronouns or a narrative on a resume.
Okay. We're going to do one more audience question and then we'll go back to some other questions. But thank you guys so much for the participation. We hope that, you've been enjoying these coffee and careers every Tuesday. We've been enjoying doing them. So thank you guys so much for joining in. So we have another question and I don't know if we'll be able to see all of it. So I do apologize again if we can't. But it says, there we go. Can displaying short-term contract work decrease chances of being hired full-time at other organizations?
I think I love the key word was contract. So if you are a freelance or self-employed and it was a contract, state that. So under self-contractor or that information, put the dates and let them know that was a contract position. The more you explain it, the better chances for you. Don't leave me hanging. If I just see freelance and from this month to this month, I instantly start wondering, it's like, gosh, did they stop the job? What happened? Did they get fired? So anytime you can add, temporary contractual job, the more information you can get, and we can help format that for you, the better for you.
Yep, definitely. I don't know if you've been hearing, but like we're saying, like we would love to look over your resume. Like we want to look over your resume. So let me just remind you guys of some resources because Lisa keeps saying like, let us look over your resume, and we want to. So let me tell you how are some ways that you can do that. We have virtual walk-in hours Monday and Wednesday from 1 to 3 p.m. That we can look over that. You can also upload your resume to Handshake, and it will take us 24 to 48 hours to look over and give you feedback. And then also you can make an appointment. So if you want to make an appointment and the 1 to 3 time doesn't work for you for the virtual walk-in hours, then go ahead and make that appointment, and we can just dissect your resume, say, hey, this is where we think it would be, beneficial of, hey, format it this way, right? This is, every resume is different. And also, like Lisa was saying, is you got to tailor it also to a specific position and employer. So if you need help with that, we're more than willing to do that. So those are just a few resources. I know we keep saying, hey, we want to look over your resume. Those are the ways that you can do it.
And there's so many great resources on Handshake too. We have examples of all, and those aren't necessarily to copy, but to give you an idea of, if I was creating one, I would pull resumes from different majors just to see what the content looks like, and then use that to tailor make mine.
Yeah, perfect. So those resources, guys, are on Handshake under the resources tab. That's what Lisa was saying. And those are great for you guys to utilize. And then accomplishment statements, the power verbs, all of those are useful tools to help you with your resume. Mm-hmm. All right, Lisa, so let's just talk about some uh-ohs. So you probably have seen a lot of uh-ohs over probably thousands of resumes that you probably looked at. Mm-hmm. So what are some tips that what are some of those uh-ohs, and then what are some tips that you can give to students to not have those uh-ohs?
Well, here's one. It's customer service, not customer service. So reread it. Read it backwards. Read it. Have someone else read it. Make sure you are, here's the deal. If you say that you're detail-oriented on your resume and yet you can't add the date or you have misspellings, you've already written yourself off. You have not proven any evidence. So you want to make sure, again, it goes back to that first impression. Don't show up for a date with spinach in your teeth. Don't come in with a dirty resume or crumpled resume. I've had resumes turned in that were absolutely beautiful, but with watermarks on them, or crumpled, or sort of like the dog ate it. This is an employer's first representation of you. Now more than ever, when the competition is so much higher, how do you want to be looked at as an as a candidate? So it should be very clean and orderly. So when dates are wrong, so with spacing and poor dates, or again, like we talked about, plagiarism, the cut and pasting of a job description. The industry, we've shared it before. It's not as large as you think, and so when you see things that are that is not authentic, if you're a freshman and you have this wealth of experience, you better be able to provide evidence of that. So make sure that it is authentic. Some of the other OOs would be, again, vague information, lack of dates, misspelling, abbreviations. Don't use etc. on a resume. When I'm reading that, I'm like, and what is etc.? So you want to make sure that you have, you're not leaving me hanging.
Mm-hmm. Some other things, just I don't think you mentioned them, is like make sure it's a PDF, and then also check the file name. We always see like things is like, this is the final one, or please approve.
Or for the love of all mankind, or the same thing with your email address. This is not the time to put hotchick@gmail.com. This would be, have a professional email, and no, that wasn't mine. Make sure that it's a professional email. I wouldn't use your university email because you're not always going to be there at your university. So right now is the time to establish a solid, a professional email. And again, the PDF, make sure it's your first name and last name. Those are those things. Never send your resume in a Word doc. An employer will open it up and it's all over the place. So make sure it's in a PDF form.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we'll answer some more audience questions. So if you guys have any questions, you guys can either, if it's a long question, go ahead and put it in the comments. If it's like a shorter question, you guys can use the box with a question mark. But what's the difference, Lisa, between a resume and a CV?
Okay, so Well, curriculum vitae, which is a CV, is just a much more fun word to say. So, a curriculum, a resume is a competency base. It's a marketing piece of your accomplishments, whereas a curriculum vitae is more for your academic accomplishments. So, whereas a resume is one page, a curriculum vitae can be 2 to 3 pages, and it has information on your research, any publications, any of your teaching experience. So it's definitely more focused on academia. So a freshman, a sophomore, junior, sometimes even a senior, there's not necessarily a need for a CV, but it's more for what you've done as far as your teaching interests, your teaching, your publications, like I've said, additional certifications. We have great examples, but it's much more for your academic background.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then we're kind of switching. So someone brought up cover letters. So I just want to, since they brought it up, why not answer it? It says, how would you tailor your cover letter specific to a specific position or whatnot?
That's a great question. Here's the deal. No one really likes writing cover letters, and no one really likes reading them. But if you are asked to write one, write it. What you don't want to do, we talk to recruiters all the time where they know if you are just copying and pasting. So if you're writing a cover letter to Esri and then to Google the next day and all you're doing is flipping the employer's names, they know that. So it's not a research paper. You need to, again, take the time. Yes, it can be daunting, but let me remind you of how much you've spent on your education and your experience thus far. So I think taking an hour and having some constructive criticism is definitely worth it if it's going to land you a position or an interview. So all a resume is a simple, greeting, dear so-and-so, and again, we have examples, and tell them how you wrote that, how you found out about the position. And then the second one is not a research. You're also not vomiting your resume. All you're doing is you're aligning your education and experience to the job at hand. So you're kind of marrying both of that education and experience. But as a reader, if the first couple of lines are boring, why in the world am I going to read on? So you got to grab my attention right away. I want to know about you. If we never had a chance to meet, who are you? And why'd you go into sports performance psychology? Why'd you go into photography? Those are those things. I want to get to know you. And then that third paragraph is just anticipatory. Thank you so much for your time. I've enclosed my resume. Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from you. You want to make sure that it's easy to read, it's quick to read, and I should definitely get to know you a little bit. But 100%. The last thing you should ever do is have a stack of cover letters and just change the name. The employer knows better.
Mm-hmm. And we can go, you guys can look over our sample cover letter, and we have a cover letter checklist on Handshake. So that's what Lisa's talking about the different format and whatnot. So you can go ahead and look at that. Mm-hmm. We have time for just a few more questions. We've gotten this question quite a bit, actually, Lisa. So I'm going to pull it up. Simple question, but what font should the resume be?
Well, according to my son, never use papyrus, but papyrus. Sorry, I said it wrong. I'm already in trouble. At Times Roman, you're better at all the names. You do that because I'm going to slaughter every single font name.
I think I say, instead of me slaughtering the names too, it's just as long as it's professional. You don't want to be like, the Wingadings or blah, 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 or whatever, right? As long as it's professional. It shouldn't be looking like, graffiti or whatever. So I wouldn't say there's like a set in stone. I mean, Lisa, you could say it if there is or not, but I don't fully feel like there's a set in stone font that you should use. Just make sure it's professional. Like Lisa's saying, you can use, Calibri or Times New Roman or Arial. Any of those are strong. But if you question whether it's professional or not, again, talk to our office. We can let you know if it looks professional, if it doesn't look professional. We'll have a different set of eyes since we do look at resumes all the time. But I don't think there's like a set in stone like type that you need to use font wise. Just kind of have good judgment on it, and definitely have us. If you want to stray away from the normal ones, have us look over it.
And it could be the most beautiful font in the world, but if you're still lacking content and vague information, font is the least amount of your problems. You need to have a strong marketing piece.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. We have another question. We already answered this, but I want, they might have not been here, but what should we title our resume when sending it to a potential employer?
So in that PDF, you're just writing your first name and last name, and you can put the date, but it's simple because that way you don't have to keep changing it for every job that you apply to. Don't have a title, don't put mechanical engineering resume. If I'm looking for it as an employer, or if I'm filing it under your name, and so just have first name, last name, or last name, first name.
Yeah, perfect. All right, let me see if there's any other questions that I missed. I think a lot of these that we got to. If there's any other questions, you guys are more than welcome to put those in. I'm going to ask Lisa our last question, and then, but if you have any other questions, we might be able to get to a few in a little bit. Okay, so Lisa, if a student can have one tip about resumes, which is kind of hard because there's a lot that goes into resumes, but maybe one takeaway that they could do right after this, what would that be?
I'm going to cheat and say 2. It needs to be relevant. You need to have relevant experience. You need to, I'm going to lie and say 3. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be tailored to the job you're applying to. If you're applying to one position for a reason, I need to know as an employer why. There's still, don't leave me hanging. And the third one was, again, be authentic. Start working on, during this season where maybe you're not working as much or your job was rescinded, start gaining more experience, whether that's in technical skills, Excel and Excel, work on Adobe, on some of the other technical skills that you can do, work on volunteering, anything that you can create a solid candidate for. A solid candidate.
Got it. And also, if you want to learn a language too, that could be a good resource.
Yeah, so huge, yeah.
Okay, so we have another question. So we're only going to take, I think, this last question, or I guess we have 2 more. Okay. It says, is Handshake the best place to get feedback / improve our resume?
I like that. I mean, if I was a student and I was turning in a resume and I turned it in and all of a sudden I got it back saying, here's some changes. If I was you, I would then make an appointment with the Career Center. Instead of going back and forth, we get a ton of resumes in, and our goal is to make sure you have the strongest representation of yourself. Employers are on Handshake. So if we see mistakes or something that's just not going to fly, why would we set you up for failure? And so the best thing you can do is, if it gets turned back, then contact us via Handshake, make an appointment with one of us for a resume review. We'll pull up your resume, we'll take a half hour, and we'll go through each one of them. I think that's a better use of your time. You can keep sending it in, but if there's something missing, we probably can explain it a little bit better via WebEx or on the phone.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that for me specifically, that I just have I feel like I connect better with students when it's through an appointment. Not saying that Handshake, like uploading to Handshake isn't, a good resource as well. I think it's a good resource for students, but like what Lisa's saying, it's a lot easier if we're trying to talk to you about format. How can we say that in a sentence where you might understand it, when it's just easier for us to show you what we mean? Hey, maybe do 2 columns, or let's, take this portion out, or just have a conversation about it.
Don't you think, Rebecca, it's in those times when we're talking to a student and we find out, it's like they say, oh yeah, I traveled to India the last 3 years in a row. And I'm like, why isn't this on your resume?
Exactly.
Or, yeah, I've done this or this, or I only speak, Spanish, but I'm not a very, fluent writer. It's sometimes during those conversations where we're able to pull out some incredible tangible evidence to get on to make sure your resume is stronger. So our whole goal is that when an employer calls us and says, we're looking at this type of a candidate, and they're going on to Handshake, because once your resume is approved on Handshake, now employers get to look. So we want the very best representation of you on Handshake.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, so this is going to be our last question, and it looks like it's related to cover letters, but it says, I'm applying to a new grad nurse residency program for PICU, and do not know who to address a cover letter to. Should it be specific to the PICU unit if they decide who gets the job, or HR?
Great question. Here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to put to sir or madam. No one's called me madam in a very long time, and if they do, I'm going to have a problem. you either want to do dear hiring manager, dear talent acquisition team. So what you want to avoid is to whom it may concern. So avoid having vague comments. So instead, one, try to find out. You can always call, if you are assertive, call that department and ask, would you mind telling me who the nurse manager is or the HR manager for that department? If you can't get that information, then I would do dear hiring manager or talent acquisition team.
Okay. Well, that is all the questions that we have time for today. I'm just going to reiterate our resources just real quick. We have walk-in hours Monday and Wednesday from 1 to 3 p.m. Those are virtual walk-in hours, so we'll be doing those over WebEx. We also have, you can upload your resume to Handshake, and like I said, it takes us 24 to 48 hours to look over your resume, or you can make an appointment with either Lisa, myself, or any of the other staff members in the Career Center, and we would be more than willing to look over your resume and just kind of help you. So thank you guys so much for joining in this week on resumes. Lisa, was there anything last though you wanted to add before we end this? Are you good?
I think, again, just remember the effort that you put into your education. Remember the effort and the money that you've spent. Your resume is it's your billboard. It should be your number one marketing piece. And so this is not a time to be humble. It's also not a time to be, to not be authentic, but to really use it as a marketing piece. I want to get to know you, and your competition is doing it. So whatever your competition is doing, take it up to the next level and have us look at it, have someone reread it.
Well, thank you, Lisa, so much for giving your expertise on resumes. And you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye.
Bye.